Today we're going to be talking about the thing that did spark the n- wanting to have Brandon on again was the news when Trump broke in and removed Maduro. It was Maduro. Am I getting the name right? From
Maduro, yep.
Maduro from his position and made this dramatic of international statement. And it's supposedly about an oil plan, but Brandon, you actually have a really good video on your YouTube walking through this, but for knowing that not everybody has seen that yet, you can bear repeating if that comes up. We'll talk about what dumb money is doing right now. We're going to talk about the employment crash, which is very real. We've been seeing that. Shout out to your Trader Builder business course that I've been in. Can you tell me how long has it been? Are we going on? Is it's for a year for sure, but it feels like longer. How long have you been doing it?
So this August will hit the 2-year mark, actually.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's been invaluable for someone like myself. I may or may not trade. Yeah, I think you know that. But I come for the knowledge to see what is actually happening in the markets. I find it so interesting. I'm not able to exactly do anything with it, but it's good because your imagination is much more always almost always more stressful or more frightening than what's real. When you got something real, it's like, okay, there's a ground and this is what we're working with. So yeah, that's way better. We'll talk about the volatility in the stock market and what the dramatic rise in the value of precious metals might mean about the economy. Everyone's chirping about that, and then we'll talk about the future of the economy, what maybe you see coming compared to what's been historically patterned out, what might be different now. So, where would you like to begin, Brendan?
Sure. Well, let's start with the geopolitical front. That's because, that's the very top of the macro picture right now, kind of influencing more things down the line and ultimately reaching our lives. So let's just start at the very top, actually.
And would you like your presentation?
Sure, let's get started.
Okay, perfect. There you go. I'll take the banner down just for now. But you can find Brandon, by the way, at school.com/ trading business / about. And I'll share a link as well in the chat as we go.
Everyone is reacting to the headlines again, and we're having talks of World War III. Precious metals are going to the moon. So we have a lot to cover, and I'll explain why these things are happening. But as a trader, I look at the structural math, and I'm not just looking at 2026. I'm actually looking at the next decade of geopolitical rewiring. So we'll cover why Venezuela, Greenland, and Iran aren't the quick fixes savior you've been promised from the Trump admin and the media. We'll also cover why precious metals breakout is a systematic signal that you just can't ignore right now. And we'll also cover how to navigate the frozen labor market that's already been eaten by AI, and I'll show you how to thrive in it outside the system.
Right. Yeah, that's a very big thing with the AI, literally eating up the jobs. So, yeah, I definitely want to go deep into that as well.
Yeah, so this isn't about fear-based forecasting, okay? I'm really going to be covering what I call the great decoupling of labor and wealth, and the data I'll provide will show why energy hegemony is really the only end game that matters when it comes to geopolitics. So if you don't understand the shift from working for money to being in the know, you're going to be on the wrong side of the largest wealth transfer in history.
Can you define hegemony?
Yeah, so basically, I'll give you an example. So the US right now, the US dollar has the hegemony when it comes to world currency, world reserve. Uh, Now, on the energy front, the US is also trying to be the biggest player when it comes to energy hegemony. So there's a few countries battling it out right now, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing in the news.
Right. So, hegemony would be like eminence, being the leader.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Perfect. Good. So, I'll stop you when I don't understand things, if that's all right.
Sure,
And no
yeah,
doubt
go
it'll
ahead.
help everybody too. But Brendan, you are very smart. You have a lot of knowledge, and so I'll help to translate that at times. Come and say hello in the chat if anybody's there. Let us know you're there. As usual, these streams are extremely shadow banned. It's getting worse. People are telling me they have to go looking for me. They get unsubscribed. Their comments disappear in my videos. Sometimes I get off one of these. There's less views than there were people in the chat. So it's amazing that it gets out at all, and it's got to be organic. So help with that would be awesome. All right, Brenton. So wherever you would like to go with this. Ah, Janice Basello. Nice to see you. I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, so let's start first with the very macro geopolitics and world events right now. Then, as we go on, I'll show you these events and themes that are shaping your future down the line. So, like I've been kind of saying on this show the last couple of years, the old free trade globalism model has been dying, like we've been covering the last couple of years. So, we're starting to see the nails in the coffin emerge. So, right now, we're witnessing a fundamental pivot towards what I call nation state protectionism. And the US right now is utilizing regime change in strategic posturing to monopolize the physical commodities needed for the next century.
Okay. And so just to repeat for maybe people who haven't heard that we have the narrative in the truth world that we're moving, they want us to move towards some globalist culture, but where you get one world religion, one world leader, one politic. And you've always shown how that's actually not the case.
Yeah. And later as we go on, I'll hopefully show how evident that is.
Great.
So, yeah, everyone's talking about Greenland right now. I will say, don't ignore the Greenland play. It isn't just a meme that's going around online. This is actually a strategic mineral acquisition that the US is trying to get. Now, in this picture, you can see that Greenland holds 25% of the world's rare earth minerals. And for context, the rare earth minerals are what needed to fuel the next tech boom that we're seeing in AI, and electronics in general. So right now, the world's powers are really battling out over minerals amongst other commodities that we'll cover. So what's interesting about Greenland right now, it may seem like a meme or media talk right now, but the U.S. Export Import Bank actually just issued a $120 million letter of interest to fund the Tambreez mine here in Greenland that stores these minerals. Now, what's interesting about this is as the U.S., we're overriding a soft NATO. And I say soft NATO because in retrospect, they've been too soft when it comes to the Russian Ukraine uh, confrontation, war, let's call it. And they've been losing that battle as it's been clear and clearer by the day, despite the propaganda we've been fed the last couple of years. Oh, Russia's going to fall over the next day at any point. That just hasn't been the case, and we're actually losing battleground as we speak over in Ukraine. Now, I don't have hopes in the peace talks either. I think Putin is really riding that out as long as he can, and just really draining the West, especially NATO, of resources. And this is important for Putin because, well, as we've seen through NATO, uh, European uh, European countries have not really been contributing to that as much as the U.S. And the U.S. is talking about overriding NATO here with this Greenland thing. If you guys don't know, Greenland is currently owned by Denmark. And what's interesting is, and ironic about that is, over almost a century ago, I can't remember which president it was at the time, but they actually signed a treaty with the current PM of Denmark at that time, agreeing that because Denmark allowed the US to buy the US Virgin Islands, we would never try to take Greenland. Now, a treaty is not a legal document, it's really just hearsay. And we can see right now, with this administration's actions, they're definitely ignoring that. As well as NATO. NATO has threatened to uh, try to protect Greenland. But as we've seen through the Ukraine Russian war, they don't have the resources to do it, but we do. So, the Greenland thing, I think, might happen sometime soon. I don't have an exact date, of course, but
Mhm.
so yeah, Greenland is really the end game, and then also Iran is next, and I'll show you why that is.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So that it sounds like there's literally conflict between Trump and NATO. What you're saying is Trump is overriding NATO. And so maybe you're already going to speak to that, but what are the implications for all the NATO countries, for example?
Well, they've been trying to play tough with words only. But
Mhm.
if we actually look on boots on the ground in Greenland, we have about 7 to 11 air bases or military bases there right now. That's the most compared to any other nation. The European Union, they've only provided a handful in comparison to our capacity there. Now, Trump, this is what I mean by the nation state protectionism. Trump is really the first to rattle the cage with that on the world stage when it comes to not only the NATO alliance. He's been talking about how we need to pull out. It's really just a money drain for us, and that goes into the isolationism that I've been forecasting. And we're seeing it in real time when it comes to U.S. separating from Europe. So Europe, we've seen is just too weak. And, right now they're actually meeting at the World Economic Forum as we speak at Davos. This leader here, uh, who looks like a gremlin, who knows what that is. But, they keep talking to, the same talking points. While Trump actually was just there and he just doubled down saying, we will take Greenland despite, the European sentiment.
Right. Any chance you're going to take Canada? Please take Canada.
So we won't be able to take it as a whole, as a 51st state, as it's been touted by Truth Social's posts. The only likely scenario would be that a province would succeed from Canada and enter the US.
Right. We're seeing Alberta try to position themselves that way.
Alberta is the most likely to do that.
Hmm.
Although we have bigger problems on the board right now, so I don't anticipate that to happen soon.
Okay.
Also, when it comes to Carney, what's interesting is, the Canadians are the dumbest people ever. We joke about how Americans are, but in this latest election cycle, the fake election, uh, Carney is really just a banker. He doesn't represent Canada. Although the liberal Canadians, which is probably the majority of you guys there, they believe that he's looking out for Canada's best interests. But historically, Canada has been really just a trough of resources for the British Crown. And if we look at Carney's background, he was a banker at Goldman Sachs first, working in New York. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me if Trump and him had a relationship in the decades past. He was pretty high up in Goldman Sachs. Now I know quite a bit about Goldman Sachs. They really only hire psychopaths. They kind of screen them out. It's really interesting how that works, but they
Wow.
all are delusional. And unfortunately, when it comes to Carney, he really is just a not only Goldman Sachs banker, but he also has a background in central banking. He was the first foreigner to be the central bank head for the Bank of England.
Mm,
So what does that tell you? The British
right.
is still very much in control of Canada. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I don't think the UK would really have the resources to challenge a province from succeeding. Uh, there might be some legal stops and a lot of lawsuits, but Trump, he's a TV personality, right?
Mhm.
So even the talks and rumors of this happening is a win for him. It gives him relevancy in the media, as well as the other things going on right now. So you know, bad news or not is good news for Trump.
Got it. Yeah, they know how to work the media. That's like they always said in the marketing world that any publicity is good publicity. Doesn't matter whether it's bad or wrong. It gets you out there, gets people thinking about you, taking a position for or against you, which works all for you.
And throughout the years, even as a TV personality, all the way down to the presidencies, Trump has really doubled down on that point. All news is good news.
Hmm.
He has a masterful way of getting people, even his supporters, to hate him, even turn their back on him. And then next he surprises somebody. The surprise element. He's great at that. Keeps everyone on their edge and gets the base back excited. So we'll have to see
Well,
what happens with this. But I think there are some things and some challenges he's going to have to face, which we'll talk about. It's not going to be some smooth sailing like it may sound. It's not going to be easy for him to take over Iran. It's not going to be easy for him to take over Greenland, which are really the main two major battlefields right now when it comes to the world stage.
Okay, and coming back to oil basically, right? And those
And that
2
leads
things.
me to my next point with Maduro.
Mhm.
Um, we definitely have seen the major ouster of this guy. And it has triggered a gold rush narrative in the media, from conservatives even to the liberal Bloombergs. Basically, it's saying that President Trump is promising a massive revival of the Venezuelan oil industry within 18 months from now. However, the gap between geopolitical ambition of Trump and the geological reality is massive here. So it's not going to be as smooth sailing as it may sound.
'Kay.
So the promise is the U.S. is going to help expand operations in Venezuela and start making money basically off this oil in under 18 months. But the reality is, a lot of oil experts are saying, um, this is going to take closer to 5 to 7 years actually, just to double production to 2 million barrels per day. Now, the price tag is another issue here. So, returning to the glory days of Venezuela, for 3 million barrels of production would cost about 183 billion from now through 2040, actually. And really, the only ones that are going to be responsible for that would be, of course, the publicly traded companies like Chevron. That's the only oil refiner there right now, thanks to Joe Biden's lift on sanctions.
Right, and are you gonna get into it that, like, the quality of the oil is not even good and it's not comparable? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. That gets me into the engineering bottleneck that we're facing here. So on this chart, you can see over here on the right side of this, I don't know if it's hard to see, but Venezuelan oil actually is considered low value oil worldwide. Um, Now, I'll give you some background on this. Venezuela, it just doesn't pump oil; it pumps what the oil industry calls sludge. So their reserves in the Aronoco Belt are what are called heavy sour crude, which is too thick. It's literally so thick it can't flow through pipelines or be processed by standard refineries. So to move this oil, you need what are called upgraders, which are basically massive, multi-billion-dollar mini refineries that turn this Venezuelan sludge into uh, syn crude. So, out of the four major upgraders, only one, run by Chevron, of course, what I mentioned earlier, is currently functional. The others are rusted out or stripped for parts as we speak. So, you cannot simply just reboot these units. You actually have to rebuild them all together.
Right. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So, the headline about the US seizing, the 30, 50 billion barrels, and, it's going to make us rich. It sounds massive, right? But let's put into quantitative context here. So the volume would be 50 million barrels. Is roughly 2.5 days worth of U.S. total oil consumption. So it wouldn't even amount to that much, even if the miracle did happen. Of revising the Venezuela oil industry. Um, Now let's
Has
get back to the. Oh, go ahead.
has the math hit the mainstream? Like, have they had to respond to that, or they just throw out the numbers and everybody goes, "Ooh, ah," to a big number?
A little bit, more on niche channels like Bloomberg. Yeah, I don't really watch too much in the media, to be honest, but
Mhm.
that's kind of a more of a smart money outlet, and, I have seen some presenters kind of bring this up. I don't think they mentioned the 2.5 days of total US oil consumption, though. That's something I discovered recently on my own.
Yeah. Doing the math, being the quant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, the back to the quality issue, a bunch of this sanctioned oil is literally sitting on, rusted tankers. Uh, so it's high sulfur, it's dirty, meaning it can't go anywhere, right? So it must go through complex Gulf Coast refineries. It's not like we just take it back to the US. um, and these Gulf Coast refineries are already at high capacity as we speak. So for traders, or even for that matter, normies at home, the Venezuela story is really more of a long duration play. It's not going to provide a short term supply shock and make oil cheaper all of a sudden. All of a sudden you pay less at the pump. I'll talk about why oil has kind of, gasoline in particular has gone down in price, but it has nothing to do with Venezuela. It was actually happening before all this already.
Yeah, just anecdotally, the gas prices have been fairly reasonable lately, fluctuating in a lower range, and then all of a sudden, I'm driving the other day, and it's like, kaboom! It's way up all of a sudden for us anyways.
Yeah, so oil has actually hit a 12-week high recently. So I'll be talking about why my outlook on oil is actually bullish, meaning I think it's going to go up in the next year or two at least. So, you might be happy at the pump right now, but you better fill up now.
Right, so stock up.
So, lately I've been just been filling up as much as I can.
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting because my son has become a fan of, HEVs, the hybrid electric vehicles.
Oh, fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so that you've got that to rely back on and not going full on EV, but yeah, I
Oh,
think
that's very based of him. I think he sees through the EV illusion.
Mhm.
I think we saw some projections, especially in California, where they're going to, get rid of all combustion oil engines by 2030. And that's just simply not going to be possible, especially with the price of these things. More than ever, EVs have been higher and higher in price. And that's actually why car manufacturers and their stocks are suffering as we speak. Not enough people are interested in buying that. And a lot of people are priced out of the car market in general. The EVs are even more expensive than your standard truck or utility vehicle or even just a passenger vehicle.
Yeah, if I could jump in here that we do have this illusion, I'd say, that the corporations are just pushing all their agendas on us and they're gonna do this and do that. But this is an example where the consumer spoke. They took a look at it, they saw a few fires, they looked at the truck looks Elon's truck looks like a dumpster.
Oh, yeah.
It became like a favorite way to make fun of things, and then so the people chose, and then the corporations inevitably they go with the people because the people have the money.
Yeah. I mean, everyone that's, an Elon stan, they believe that Cybertruck was going to, really bring back the profitability of Tesla. That simply hasn't happened. They haven't sold barely any units compared to, their earlier models. So, my outlook on Tesla especially is pretty bearish in the long term, but you have to be careful on the timing with that one, just because there's so many suckers when it comes to Tesla stock.
Okay. Yeah, so would you call the people doing Tesla stocks dumb money?
I would, in fact, it's one of the most popular stocks amongst dumb money.
Hey,
Yeah.
there you go.
They're the same crowd that's like AI is our god kind of people. I'll talk about that too later. How I'm not so hopeful that AI will really be our god per se, but it will impact our life in a negative way. Um, there's some ways I'll present that can kind of navigate that, but yeah, I mean, with the dropping prices in gasoline, um, you know, it has kind of made the practicability of EVs even less. But I think those days are going to be over here soon. There's a lot happening in the world that's going to make oil more expensive here in the near future.
Alright.
So yeah, the oil is there in Venezuela. I'll kind of go over, these numbers might be fudged by Maduro and Chavez, the communist dictators. But, if we're going off of the paper numbers that they did present, the oil is there in the pipe, is there, but the pipes are broken. So until the upgraders are rebuilt, Venezuela is really just an asset rich country with a frozen cash flow at the moment. Now, it's also interesting about oil right now is there is a relationship between oil and the dollar, not only because of the petrodollar, but year to date, the US dollar has lost about 20 or 10% in purchasing value. So a weaker dollar historically is a push for oil prices to go higher.
Okay.
So,
And that
this quick fix to the US economy when it comes to Venezuela is really just a lie, and I'll go through the Venezuela reserves are actually a fantasy. But to understand why the Venezuela gold rush is a mess, you have to understand the physical chemistry of the barrel first. So, what is crude oil? Well, uh, it has different grades, as I was showing you earlier, on a world stage. It takes a lot of refinery, and as you can see here, um, it consists of many different chemical composite. And the quality is going to vary. West Texas crude oil, otherwise known as WTI, is actually some of the lightest oil here, as you can see on the left side, as compared to Venezuela Pelon, which is here on the far right almost. It's actually the furthest right one in the world. So this is the lowest value oil in the world. Unlike water, crude oil is not a chemical compound, as it may sound. It's going to be a complex of hydrocarbon molecules. Just as water boils at 212 degrees, each compound in the crude oil has its own unique boiling temperature. So the more carbon atoms in a molecule, the higher the temperature at which it boils and vaporizes. So the phenomenon permits crude oil to be refined into so many products. Uh, but before that, it must be refined and manufacture gasoline and heating oil at the quality that the world demands.
All right.
So, yeah, a large part of refining is simply converting the unwanted low value fuel oil into wanted gasoline that we pay for at the pump before a refiner buys a single cargo. A refiner being like Chevron, for example. So they look at crude oil as um, an assay, they call it. This is a complete chemical evaluation, and each refiner has their own different assay of the particular crude oil type. So it tells the refiner if the oil is compatible with their industrial hardware or not. So we value crude oil based on the two primary metrics. The first one is API gravity, and that's just meaning how light or heavy the oil is, right, in the barrel. And then number two is the sulfur content. So, lighter, of course, is going to be what's called sweet. So that's, US shale oil, Canadian shale oil for that matter, is some of the sweetest in the world. Um, and then we have the sour, of course. That's more heavy, is what it's called.
Mhm. And so, you had a slide with the breakdown, composition of it. Can we see that one more time?
Yeah. You want me to go back? Let's see.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Hydrogen plus carbon equals hydrocarbons. Interestingly, I mean, this is the makings of carbon dioxide, right? Like, you got the carbon, it's the demonized element. It's supposedly the one that's I don't know if there's anything to tie in there about the whole climate hoax.
There is. There's still a big push for renewable. Um, but especially with the data centers popping up around the world, uh, you know, the renewables is just simply not gonna be enough. It's more costly, in fact. Um, and the infrastructure just simply isn't there. It doesn't work as good as well. So, really, ever since 2024, we really see a lot of nation states ditching uh, the ref- uh, the renewables. So now we're getting more into the nuclear energy realm and just really hydrocarbons, as we can see here.
Right.
So yeah, as the economic value increases and it gets lighter and sulfur decreases, lighter crudes contain more valuable components like gasoline, which the world still runs on in a very large part.
Alright, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, Venezuela on paper more has more than 300 billion barrels of oil, which roughly estimates to 17% of the world's known oil reserves. It's going to be in the Carcaraz area here in Venezuela, as I've shown you on the map. Most of these reserves are in vast deposits called in what's called the Orinoco oil belt, and I might be mispronouncing it. I'm not the best Spanish speaker. I have a very time rolling my tongue. But there's even more potential underground, is what they're touting the Venezuelan government. But even if that is true, still gonna be high sulfur, still gonna be dirty and heavy. Cost of the refine, like as we've been going. A refiner would clearly be paying more per barrel for light West Texas Intermediate oil than the Venezuelan Pelon.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so actually, let's just go skip to the next one. When you hear that Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, you got to remember this is about two-thirds of that number comes from the Chavez Maduro government. So they're probably using generous assumptions. to reclassify large volumes of lower utility heavy crude as recoverable. Now, what's interesting is Venezuelan is a founding member of OPEC, um, and their official statistics show that its production is down 71% from its 1998 peak.
Mm.
I believe that was in the Chavez days. So
Oh,
Venezuelan crude is so thick, like I was saying earlier, it can't throw a flow through a pipe to move it. You're going to need, heavy machinery and operators. And so, this could be a multi-billion-dollar project. That's really the reality check. So out of um, the companies like Chevron, they've actually been saying this is not functional for them. Now there are other rusted skeletons stretched for parts, and you just can't reboot those units. Uh, So, the energy experts estimate that'll take 5 to 7 years, 183 billion through 2040, just to hit 2 days of US gas supply.
so what's Trump thinking? Like, what's the scam here that he would go so public with a move that really isn't that's
That's a
not
good question, actually. So, it has less to do with the oil because, if he has advisors worth their salt, they would be showing this. This is not hard to find, guys.
mm,
Anyone can find this on the internet. Uh, the big play is really just to damage Russia and their funding for the Ukraine war, and then also lower Chinese oil supply. Venezuela is, on paper about 4% of Chinese oil supply.
okay.
But there is actually a lot more that's undocumented, which I'll kind of talk about. So he's really just hitting those two. He does have a talk with Xi coming up this spring. It's going to be the trade talk, of course, which is kind of funny because he's coming to Xi. And I think because of not only that, but other things, Xi has more leverage over Trump in this negotiation right now.
Okay.
Just as the US has been siloed from the world more and more as time goes on, so has China. Um, and China is
Mm.
has closer relationships with most countries than US right now. Their diplomacy really has to do more with, hey, let's give you money and we'll provide the resources and manpower to reconstruct your infrastructure. Meanwhile, the US is doing regime change and stuff like that, right?
Can you define siloed? Mm,
Yeah, just getting more isolationist. The nation state becoming more protectionism rather than trying to work the globalization model.
got it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
what are we looking at here on this
So
chart?
yeah, we can see that. And this is another on paper number, which I'm skeptical of. I think it might be even lower. Of Venezuela oil production is actually less than one third of his level at the start of Maduro's presidency. So Chavez was really the peak of it in '98. And as Maduro ruled, it just got lower and lower. Okay, so this is the rusted oil storage units that I was talking about, which would be impossible to store the oil in that they could pull out of Venezuela. So this is actually a satellite image of Porto Morando storage facility, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, guys. Again, I don't really care for Spanish or South American culture that much. But one from this is from 2022. Yeah, this first picture. It shows white, clean tank tops. And then this is actually from last year, 2025. It's showing, as you can see, orange and black. That's signs of rusting. So, when this sits idle for years, they just don't stay empty. They're going to corrode and leak over time. So, a
Right,
third of the country's storage is likely unusable.
right. And I imagine that would be extremely polluting, like rust doesn't go in oil, right?
Yeah, which is something the Venezuelan government just simply just doesn't care about.
Right. Quick
So,
aside Oh, yeah, quick aside for anyone who likes, the different kind of culinary salts that are out there and think they're more healthy. Himalayan salt is red because of rust, and that's poison for the body as well as the oil in your car.
yeah, that's one of the biggest nutrition scams out there is
Mhm.
Himalayan salt.
Yeah. Even the
People
lamp
still think that's better.
even the lamps are gonna give off wrong ions.
Yeah, I'm very picky about my salt. I actually get it from a local salt mine here where I'm at.
Nice.
It is tested for heavy metals and yeah, definitely lower compared to your average.
That's great.
But yeah, this is industrial savage. Um, there's almost no rigs operating in Venezuela right now as well. So it's going to be nearly impossible to bring uh, the additional capacity given to Venezuela infrastructure issue, even if the U.S. wanted to rebuild it. If you can't get the product to market, it really doesn't matter if you have it, right? So the recent ouster of Maduro, um, this is what I'm talking about with the geopolitical ambition of Trump versus the reality of geological realities. So, this is not going to work out. And as I was alluding to, this has more to do with try to damage Russia and China, the major competitors of the U.S. of course, right now. Um, so
Yeah, can you unpack that a little bit more? What would the damage be that they're being supported in this war?
So basically, it helps funding. It's mainly the funding for Russians. That's like I believe right now, close to 40% of their funding comes from oil sales, which a lot of them, the Russian tankers actually. I don't know if you guys saw in the news, but the Russian tankers, they're trying to hide that they're Russian at first. They try to hide under shell companies, and that's the ships that the U.S. sees right now. As I have in the picture, they're just kind of floating off the coast. We seized them. It wasn't until the U.S. Navy confronted them that they actually raised the Russian flag, and all of a sudden, over communication, said, "Hey, we're actually part of the Russian state. If you try to hit us, uh, then you're ruining diplomacy here." Now, what's interesting is on the surface, Putin seems like the toughest world leader. But what's fascinating is with this recent Navy action, they just let it happen. Trump and Putin had a phone call, and it looks like Putin just let the tankers go.
And so, any implications of that?
Yes, they're gonna have to find other sources of funding for them. China was actually the biggest buyer of Russian acquisition to oil. Um, so next, this also makes them more reliant on Iran. Now that Venezuela is out of the picture, Iran is the next. You know, is actually the biggest exporter to Chinese oil storage. So this is really going to make them depend more on Iran, and Trump's plan is really to move in on Iran next. Now there is kind of a problem with that. I don't know if you guys saw in the news recently, but there was some protests in Iran over the current Iranian government. I'm not sure the exact details, but I do know that based on the U.S. cabinet's words on Twitter, they kind of were alluding to that those were Mossad agents starting the riots. Okay. Um, So, it wasn't organic. It was definitely CIA, Mossad, and the Iranian government actually shut the protesters down faster than the U.S. and Israel were expecting. They shut it down because the Trump was trying to tout that, hey, we'll move in, we'll help you as protesters. Help is on the way, and that originally was the first thing to really kick off uh, this recent rally in oil, which I'll show you in a second. But um, that ultimately failed. And now it's lower probability that Trump, in the US for that matter, will be able to do a regime change in Iran.
Okay,
They're kind of pinned in a corner right now. So I'm not sure if they're going to back down. I doubt they will. But I don't think it's going to be as successful as it may sound.
very good.
So yeah, these are over 30 station vessels that were idling off the coast, and we seized about 40 million barrels that were currently in storage, um, mostly Russian tankers. But that is a one-time event, and the real challenge isn't moving the oil, right? That's already pumped. It's fixing the broken industry. So let's talk about China a little bit more. So there's something called teapots, and no, I'm not talking about some blokes in Britain and their little tea parties. Which is, a little gay in my opinion. I'm just kidding. These are independent Chinese refiners operating on thin margins. So they stay alive by buying sanctioned oils that are at steep discounts because of the sanctions, right? Official Chinese data claimed they imported 30,000 barrels a day in 2020. But the data shows that the real number was actually over 500,000 barrels in 2025. Venezuela crude accounted for roughly 3 to 5%. I just go in the middle and say 4 of China's total oil imports. They also hid this by using shadow fleets just like the Russians. So these tankers turn off transponders and they spoof their location signals. Um, and they're really trying to hide that this was happening. And then once it reaches Asia, they'll rebrand the oil as Malaysian blend or Brazilian crude to bypass sanctions to avoid U.S. sanctions, of course.
Okay.
So the Venezuela oil is frequently transported via ship to ship transfers. So these ships often engage in stress transfers, is what it's called. And again, they're turning off the transponders. They're spoofing their location to hide their true origin.
I'm naive to think that somehow they wouldn't be resorting to those kind of strategies. Like that seems old world compared to where we're at these days. But there's like, oh yeah, I'm not who you think I am. I'm cloaked.
Yeah, it's almost in a way a false flag, but on a kind of more micro scale, definitely undetected compared to false flag like the Hormuz attacks we've had in the past. Um, so this is China's sneaky way of avoiding something like that, and them being accused of doing something like this. Now, according to China's General Administration of Customs, China imported 30,000 barrels per day of crude from Venezuela in 2024. And more than half of Venezuela's crude oil exports. So this is about 768,000 barrels per day. Last year went to China. Some ships they're able to pass by freely through the blockades, and they are American. And the U.S. imports, 20% of Venezuela oil produced by the U.S. oil company Chevron, which was exempted from sanctions I was telling you about through Joe Biden in 2022. So, despite having a large footprint on paper, the Chinese companies are not the largest producers in Venezuela. Chevron, of course, is. So, Chinese production might be about 10% by securing this oil, but the U.S. has neutralized Russia's ability to launder these profits through sanctions evasion. So, China isn't just a buyer, actually. They're also a lender when it comes to South America and really worldwide, especially in Africa as well. Chinese financial institutions, primarily the Chinese Development Bank, they loaned Venezuela around 60 billion through 17 different loan contracts. So that's about half of Chinese loans committed to Latin America as of 2023. Now, the repayment was supposed to be in the oil shipments to China. And certain Canadian Iraqi grades might too expensive, right? So the Chinese want the cheaper oil. So, they thought that was a fair deal, and that was part of the terms. Now that that's ruined, of course, if the U.S. wants to truly starve, what if we go off of old world terms, the access, Iran's floating terminals in the Persian Gulf are going to be the next target when it comes to the oil trade. So if the U.S. uses the same tactics that they used in the Strait of Hormuz in the past, it could shave off, quite a bit of global GDP, and that would really cement U.S. energy hegemony. So China has uh, actually condemned Trump in this military operation to remove Maduro. It's not a shock. And they actually called for the immediate release uh, and stop toppling the Venezuelan government, as they say. So, despite Beijing's displeasure with the events Venezuela, there are some silver linings for China out of this. So, first, Chinese officials are capitalizing on the U.S. intervention to portray the U.S. as kind of a bully on the world stage,
Mhm.
a violator of international law, international maritime law, and a source of regional instability. So, especially with this regime change. So, second, Beijing can also take advantage of the U.S. strike on Venezuela to push back against any U.S. criticism of Chinese efforts to bolster its claims to disputed parts of the South China Sea, which have been going on for a while now. It's really making Japan and South Korea nervous, actually, this activity in the South China Sea. Really, there's nothing they can do about it, without the US. However, despite all that, Beijing is unlikely to view this US intervention as a justification for the action against Taiwan, which China regards as an internal affair. They do consider Taiwan to be China. And you speak to any Chinese person, they'll tell you that. And, if you go on boots on the ground, that's certainly true. The culture is still China. Uh, they're very Chinese. So in the very near term, and same with Hong Kong for that matter, but in the very near term, major Chinese crude companies are also bearing the brunt of oil production reductions in response to the U.S. Blockade here.
Right.
So, yeah, Russia's ability to fund its war in Ukraine is tied directly to global oil prices. So, the higher the oil prices, the better it is for Russia, of course. And this kind of acts as a double edged sword for the Kremlin. So, Russian diplomats frame the U.S. operation against Maduro kind of like the Chinese as a armed aggression and calls for their release. Basically repeating China there. But Putin remained mum on the issue.
Mm.
And like I was saying, he just kind of held back as the U.S. took over his tankers, even though Russia has invested billions in Venezuela. So, in addition, the U.S. seizure of tankers linked to Venezuela oil exports has a direct implications for Russia's sanction evasion system. So, that was part of the hype around the whole BRICS Bros narrative that, like,
Mhm.
we saw the last few years. And that's definitely damaged that narrative. We still haven't seen any BRICS buck. I've gone through why BRICS is just impossible, a BRICS dollar in the past show with you, Beth. But, in short, there's no central power in BRICS. And to have a central currency, you have to have a central bank. So, how are you going to have a central bank amongst all of these nations that don't even get along with each other? India and Russia have complicated relationship as well as China and India, amongst other things. South Africa has a problem with Russia as well. So the list could go on,
Mhm.
and that's why we haven't seen anything for BRICS. But now,
Yeah, I was
the whole.
mm.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking about that exact thing, how frightened, I guess was it 2022 or something? Everyone was just
Yes,
freaking out about bricks, and, they were so mad at you, Brennan, when you came out and said, "No, actually, this is not even." And what do we hear about it now? Nothing,
nothing.
right?
Yeah, that's so true. They're all excited about it, and then yeah, it's just been a nothing burger.
Yeah.
So this really cements my point that I've been saying over the years. You know, because Russia was, of course, sanction evading with these oil sales through countries like Venezuela and others, Iran. But this is certainly damaging to that narrative. But yeah, the events in Venezuela, it really just exposes Russia's limits as a security guarantor. They definitely couldn't secure even their own tankers. Um, so yeah, despite Putin's loud condemnation, Moscow was unable to prevent this operation. As Trump was bragging, this was a very smooth regime change, probably one of the smoothest in history. It was over in a matter of days.
And
So,
why was Putin, tight-lipped about it? You probably just said it.
well, he wasn't tight-lipped. He actually did condemn U.S. for this.
Okay.
It was more so when his ships were actually seized. He just let Trump happen to it. They apparently had a phone call. That's the rumor, and I'm not sure what was said during that call, but it must have been interesting. Um, Now, I will say, despite how conflicting this all looks, they are part of the same club. So it's not too much of a surprise uh, that they're getting along more than what the news might make you believe. Now more than ever in 2026, uh, we're going to be seeing more propaganda. We saw a lot of propaganda during the Ukraine war from Joe Biden's presidency from what 20 early 2020s, 2022 ish. Lots of propaganda, and I think we're going to see similar propaganda, if not worse, with all these fronts being activated.
And do you have a guess at what the specific nature of the propaganda would be?
Yeah, I think the main purpose is really for the U.S. to say like, "Oh, we still the strongest military. No one can mess with us, fuck around and find out, as Trump has said. um, so far it has hold to be true, but I will say, if we look at China historically, they are not as imperialist as the U.S. has been historically. So I don't really even think China is interested in in combating the U.S. in this. They're just trying to make money sneakily.
Right. There you go.
So out of all that said, I don't anticipate a World War III happening. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but people are softer than ever. And this would really be a drone war and airstrikes. When it comes to airstrikes, the U.S. still is the top dog in that front, um, as well as this is a currency war, so there is still no currency to replace the dollar as we're speaking. World reserves have gone down a little bit. When we last spoke, it was about 60% of world reserves. Now it's closer to 40% actually. But I'll show you why nation states are actually going more into gold.
Okay.
So yeah, currently oil revenues for Russia has fallen from 50% to actually 25% of Russia's state income. So any further price drop um, caused by the Venezuelan recovery, which is kind of the counterpoint of my argument, it would directly limit the Kremlin's ability to maintain its massive drone and missile campaigns, which has gotten better over the years, and they've definitely been testing out in Ukraine. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think oil prices are going to go higher, so this probably will help make up for some of the loss here in Venezuela.
Good.
So on this chart is actually the crude oil futures. Just basically meaning how markets are pricing crude oil. So crude oil is actually reaching a 12-week high, and this comes along with everything I was talking about. There's also other issues, political risks, and supply disruptions. Actually, contrary to the narrative on media. So Trump announced a cancellation of meetings with Iranian officials until the protests stop, of course, as I was mentioning earlier, and warned that help is on the way. That kind of fizzled out. So he moves on to implementing a 25% tariff on goods linked to Iran. So that was just imposed, and this is heightening the fear of regional tension, and this would, of course, affect oil flows. So prices they're being supported by this disruption at the Caspian pipeline consortium that's in Kazakhstan. There's also bad weather, um, and maintenance has really suffered on that front. So what's also interesting is drone strikes have cut lows nearly in half to be about 900,000 barrels per day. So supply has definitely reduced already, and I don't see that slowing down. And this, of course, would make oil more expensive. Kazakhstan's largest producer, they actually halted the output uh, of their oil fields following mysterious fires at a power generation facilities across the country. So at the same time, traders are assessing this and the rising geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and Europe, actually. And this, of course, goes back to the image of Davos, which we're seeing right now. President Trump, has doubled down on the Greenland narrative in his address at Davos, um, and he keeps saying, "Hey, we're going to secure Greenland. I'm downplaying the resistance from you, EU. You guys are too weak," which is actually true. So the escalation, you know, has really raised concerns about uh, broader U.S. EU trade, which I don't think, I think this trend will continue because, as I was saying earlier, we're seeing the nation state uh, really go into protectionism mode, but U.S. really kicking that off. Um, I think they figured, hey, if we don't do it, someone else will. So let's be the first to do it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know where I saw it on the chat somewhere, but they were saying, "Is Cuba next?" But you're saying Iran would be, more of a target, even though that's not a realistic one?
Russia does have a bit of a stronghold on Cuba. That is a threat, but I don't think is as big. Um, Cuba doesn't have as many natural resources as Greenland does. Greenland, like I was showing earlier, has 25% of the rare earth minerals worldwide. Greenland is more of a priority than Cuba. Cuba is just a shithole, wouldn't really provide us any value. It really is just Russia's way of trying to move in closer to the U.S., but we could easily Unfortunately, I don't want to get excited about that, but the U.S. could easily take that out if they ever needed, if it was an immediate threat. But I don't think that's an immediate threat right now.
Right.
Now that could change, but as of right now, as we speak, that's how it is. So yeah, with all that said, this is part of the reason why I'm actually bullish on crude oil. Now, here in this chart, this is a technical analysis standpoint, meaning just reading the chart. When it comes to commodities, I would like to start with the macro outlook, and then we do the technical analysis on the chart. And the chart is showing that crude oil has been setting up this shape. It's called a bullish pennant pattern, and this has been shaping for years, even during the oil drama that we saw in Biden's presidency. Uh, so this is finally starting to break out, as we can see here. And this isn't really just a macro story. The charts are starting to confirm what the fundamentals are telling us. So if we dig a little bit deeper, what I have on here is as of January 20th, 2026. This chart is showing that smart money, mostly hedge funds and large institutions like pension funds, have been quietly building massive positions in the oil market, and they're betting on it going up. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen a massive 106,000 contracts surge through the long side, meaning that they're betting on it going up. So this isn't just buying; it's also just a frantic cover of short positions that they did have months prior on oil, as geopolitical risk in Iran and Russia reemerged.
Hmm.
So this is just showing, fund managers. They aren't just looking at next month; they're actually looking at the supply gap that we're going to have this year, and probably until at least 2030. Um, so they're really just positioned for a supply cliff where demand continues to rise. Driven by AI data centers that needs a lot of power. We don't have enough power for worldwide, and global industrialization as well. That comes with that. The ability to turn on the taps, just has really been crippled, as I was showing you guys earlier in the supply. Now let's get into gold as well.
Mhm.
We've been seeing. Actually, I'm skipping ahead. Let's go back to oil. We've had years of consolidation, but looking at the chart, it is pulling tighter and tighter, and this usually signals, so especially as we see lower lows uh, throughout the years, that this is going to be making a big breakout eventually.
And by tighter and tighter, do you mean that, like, the ups and the downs are tighter?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And I kind of demonstrated through these lines that I drew, and thought this is the pennant shape. So yeah, smart money, they must know something, right? If they're betting on oil, they're really they know that Venezuela oil boom is really a more longer term play that's not going to happen anytime soon. If it does happen, it's not a 2026 story, and they're using the Trump headlines actually in dumb money buying into the headlines as liquidity uh, to build their positions here. So, while dumb money sells because they think they're betting on oil going down because they think supply is coming based on the news. We can see that institutions are buying up the pieces because they know that supply is at least 5 years out and $103 billion away.
Our friend Sam is in the chat and he's saying shows how green energy isn't all that it's hyped up to be with smart money betting on oil. Right?
It's so true.
Yeah.
So, yeah, while the energy sector is battling the supply glut and a cooling price floor last year, we're seeing a total decoupling in the hard asset space in general, not only just oil. If oil is the blood of the current economy, makes the world go around, gold and silver are actually becoming the insurance policy for the next one. So that leaves me next to gold here. As of today, actually, gold made a new all-time high. Now it's at $4,767 an ounce. And it really started rallying last year. And you guys have might have seen me in past shows saying, a few years ago I was bearish on gold and silver for that matter, and that was because of different situation we're in. The Federal Reserve, they were cutting or hiring interest rates, which is generally bearish for gold. But the opposite came true start of end of last year, actually. The Fed flipped the script, and now they're, what the dumb money would say, printing money. So this is gonna be, historically, and what we're seeing right now is bullish for precious metals. The last time that precious metals rallied was actually in 2011 during the last quantitative easing cycle from the Fed. So, just as we look at how oil is trending towards $60 a barrel now, typically that's a deflationary signal, but there is divergence as energy costs, which is really the biggest expensive for miners, drop. So gold and silver are soaring not only because of that, but some more reasons. This isn't just a commodity rally in general. It's just a margin explosion for the mining companies. In Canada, you have a lot of silver miners there. Um, so the Commitment of Traders report, um, which was similar to the crude oil, this is on crude oil, but there's another one. This is a silver chart, by the way. It's exploding to almost 100 an ounce. Um, we can see the Commitment of Traders report that they've had a massive net long position, meaning they've been betting on it going up for a while. And I've been telling my trading community, you might not want to sell your physical precious metals if you do have some. I'm still bullish leading into 2027 at the very least,
Right.
uh,
Right.
based on what we're seeing in the world. So, the Commitment of Traders is showing as well that they're also thinking the same thing. So you really don't want to fight that. The institutions, they're going to have better data than you, so they must know something.
Right. Right. Yeah, things can change because since I've known you, your message around precious metals was that it's, not a good investment. It's still true that if you're looking at an ROI, that it's really not exactly there. Because the last time you were on, you said, yeah, now is a good time to sell silver, and
Yeah.
so yeah,
As time goes on, as a trader, my outlook has to change based on, the macro fundamentals, especially when it comes to commodities.
right,
So during those periods, yeah, that's what I was seeing. And historically, especially silver, it does underperform inflation. So, while silver and gold is exploding right now, you also have to count in that uh, the dollar lost, on paper, 10% purchasing power. But I think that's a bit light. If we actually look at the purchasing managers' decisions when it comes to manufacturing and services in the U.S. economy, they've been raising prices as the last 2 years consistently each month. So you can't tell me that inflation is only close to 3% right now. It's definitely higher than that, and you guys can definitely know that through ancestral experience. And then that trend is not going to stop. Especially for 2026 is what I'm looking at. Even next year,
wow,
prices are going to continue to go up on goods and services. So even though, gold and silver has rallied, you do have to count in your purchasing power has significantly gone down. So have you really gained that much? I mean, a little, I guess, in the short term. But if we look in the long term, especially silver, it does underperform inflation.
right. And the truth or narrative around silver and gold being high is that it is because the dollar is dying its last, taking its last breath.
Well, it's not the last breath. The last breath would be when the dollar officially um, finds a replacement. The world finds a replacement for it in the world reserves, and no one's been able to do so since the 70s. So, yeah, until we see that, I just don't think the dollar is on its last days. It's still the most traded currency in the world. Um, oil is still traded in the dollar. So, especially what we've been seeing with the oil action, like I highlighted, that isn't going to end anytime soon,
Right.
based on what I'm seeing now.
Very good. Just a quick heads up, if I need to drop out for a minute, I'm still here in the background, and I didn't go away, but it could happen.
Yeah. So now that energy was cheap last year, uh, the metals have become expensive. The miners, they aren't just producing gold; they're producing breaking cash flow. Um, so if you look at the central bank actions, they've been buying more gold as well. We can see that smaller countries have actually been buying more gold than, let's say, the bigger players like U.S. and China. Um, China, who has been buying less gold than they were in 2022 and 2023. Poland actually was the 2025 leader here on the most aggressive buying this year when it comes to gold. Uh, adding roughly about 83 tons to its reserves through October 2025. So their central bank governor has really set a target for gold to reach 30% of their total reserves. Now, we were mentioning Kazakhstan earlier. What's interesting is they've consistently added to their holdings as well. I think they anticipated what I was highlighting earlier, the decrease in oil supply. So, with an increase of gold purchasing, Kazakhstan uh, now has nearly 41 tons so far at the end of 2025. Now, India, the Reserve Bank of India, or RBI, has added approximately 75 tons since the start of 2024, bringing their official total to around 888 tons. It's kind of smaller economies adding to their gold reserves, but it is still something to watch. Turkey and China, both countries continue to buy, just at a slightly slower pace than 2022 and 2023. China is actually sitting on about 2,300 tons uh, when it comes to gold. The United States still has the most. This actually has little to do with the gold rally, though. I know this is another truther narrative. The central banks, they're buying up gold left and right. It's really just for the smaller countries. This actually has more to do with the Federal Reserve and what they're doing right now when it comes to money supply.
Quick
Yeah.
question, is it also true that China, India, and Russia are buying so much silver, or is that,
No, it's gold.
okay,
Yeah. When it comes to silver purchasing, that has more to do with companies, industries, especially silver right now. We are starting to see, a company like Samsung, for example, in South Korea, they just came out with a silver battery, which is like groundbreaking innovation. So that is part of why silver is going up. Another reason is, well, Trump has imposed tariffs that affects commodities that help uh, silver production. So we are also seeing a supply shock when it comes to silver more than gold.
supply shock, you said.
Yeah.
Right, got it.
So not too dissimilar from what we're going to be seeing in oil this year. So in this picture, I have the U.S. global, the U.S. M2 money supply. So this is basically how much money is in circulation. And as you can see, at the end of December, it was going lower and lower. But as soon as really closer later on this year, it's increased more and more. So this is a major factor on why precious metals are going higher. Uh, the Federal Reserve is, this is essentially representing quantitative easing um, and increasing money supply. Oh, China, they also hold the largest share of global liquidity. They've been quote unquote printing money a lot too, about 47 trillion worth, followed by the US and EU. So while the US is starting to expand its balance sheet again, they're buying assets rather than selling. Other major economies are been a bit more aggressive in the US actually. Bank of England, the BOE, we're talking about Carney earlier. Uh, they cut rates to 4% in August 2025, and their economy has faced significant disinflationary pressure. So this is forcing them to ease policy more rapidly than the Fed actually. Now, speaking of Canada, the Bank of Canada has been on a cutting spree. So they're lowering the policy rate to about two and a quarter percent, the interest rate as of 2025 December. So this is another direct liquidity injection into their housing sensitive economy. So yeah, across the board, we see that central banks are now holding more gold than U.S. Treasuries in their reserves for the first time actually in 30 years. And this is effectively telling us that they don't trust the fiat that they're printing.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Alright, are you good for just 1 minute if I, go and check a roast? I just don't want it to
sure.
intro. Okay,
Yeah,
1 sec, sorry.
I actually have somebody texting me right now. I think they're trying to get into my place. Um, yeah, I hope the roast is good, Beth, though. So yeah, the next slide, I'll show you the currency debasement on paper. Like I was saying, though, when it comes to manufacturing and services, purchasing managers in the U.S. They have been raising prices on goods and services consistently the last couple of years. So this isn't going to be fully accurate, right, in real life. But The struggle in the oil markets tell us the global demand for old energy is stalling. The record highs in gold tell us the demand for hard money is just getting started. So as the Fed hints at QE going into 2027, quantitative easing, the market is shifting its focus. Okay, so we're moving from a world price in oil to a world hedged in bullion. So these net long commitment of traders positions I was showing you earlier from the funds, they aren't just a bet on a commodity price. They're actually a bet against a weakening dollar. Of course, as the Fed prints more money, does more QE, of course the dollar is going to get weaker. Which leads me to my next point. We can see that Trump's latest threats around Greenland, only push the dollar and traders away from the dollar more. And it's actually the biggest decline since April. And that was, of course, during the tariff panic that we saw in the news. So yeah, the bullish structures on these commodities I've been showing you is not likely to slow down. So my outlook on the precious metals are actually still bullish until at least 2027.
What does that
Um,
mean for consumers? Does that mean they're like the price of heating their homes is gonna go up and all of that kind of stuff, and utilities and
yeah, I most likely,
mhm,
unfortunately, especially data centers were not helping with that. They were raising energy costs across the board.
ah,
There's some argument on that. Some are, the companies are saying no, we're not. We're lowering it. That's definitely not true though. Boots on the ground. Um, But, for consumers, I think, this is only gonna make prices higher for goods and
right,
services.
right.
Like we've been seeing the supply managers hint at. We'll probably see more of that rise later this year. So, yeah,
So
the Fed what I have here is, the Fed's kind of in this dilemma. Um, th Inflation is higher than they want it to be. Their target is 2% historically. Historically, that represents that, inflation is under control and the economy can grow. Um, but um, to keep rates low or to cut them, which they're going to continue to do into 2027, to service the massive national debt, uh, rising gold prices suggest that the market expects the Fed to prioritize debt service over inflation fighting, and that's certainly been the case. I'll kind of show you why in a second. This last chart, this actually shows they've been quietly expanding their balance sheet at the start of this year, actually, as we can see right here on the right side. So even though it's not officially quantitative easing, money printing, the Fed has initiated purchases of shorter term treasury bonds to maintain bank reserves. So in late 2025 and early 2026, the Fed conducted reserve management purchases about 40 billion per month. So this creates new money out of thin air to buy government debt, essentially. And so the effect of diluting, this is diluting the dollar's purchasing power, of course, and traders are going to move away from it.
does it
Um,
not give credence to the truth or narrative that they print money and kill the dollar?
there's a bit of truth in that. Yeah. Quickly, QE is definitely going to make the dollar weaker, but these are cycles. We have cycles of quantitative easing, and we have the opposite, quantitative tightening, which we went over in a last show. So it's not an end all be all. These are just you know, cycles that move every few years. Uh, from after COVID, after the money printing then to Joe Biden's presidency, we really saw them do the opposite of money printing, actually, like I was showing you guys in the past. But now they flipped the script again. So it depends what's going on with the economy. And really, this is how the Fed controls the economy, right? So yeah, coinciding with the Fed's actions, the U.S. Treasury has actually accelerated a debt buyback program. And in January this year, the Treasury has scheduled operations to purchase up to 38 billion off the run securities, meaning those bonds, per quarter for liquidity support. So by repurchasing older, higher yielding debt and replacing it with lower yielding issuance, as interest rates go down, the Treasury is attempting to manage borrowing costs, and this effectively acts as another layer of market support that mirrors, quantitative easing effects.
Mhm.
So this is going to tighten the supply of available bonds and it's going to drive traders towards safe havens like gold and silver.
Very good.
Yeah, so this is a currency valuation across the board worldwide. Year to date, the dollar has lost 10% on paper, just in the currency market. The Fed forecasting a target rate of down to close to 3% by the end of 2026, or 3.4, I should say, and 3.1 by 2027. The yield wall is actually protecting the dollar from crumbling at the moment. But as time goes on, we'll probably see the dollar get a little weaker in the next couple years.
Any predictions for the Canadian dollar, or does it just follow along with the US basically, whatever
Yeah,
it
so the
does?
Canadian government is actually cutting interest rates more than the U.S. It's down to almost 2% right now. So yeah, the Canadian currency certainly is going to see a bigger drop than we saw last year. These are last year's numbers year to date from 2024 to 2025. So as time goes on, we'll have to update this. But, last year Canada lost about 5% compared to U.S. lost 10%. U.S. was starting to cut more, but now Canada's definitely catching up. Um, so yeah, if their Fed cuts rates, if they rate cut while inflation remains sticky, real yields on the bonds minus inflation, it's going to drop further in negative territory. So this kind of removes a primary deterrent for holding gold, which pays no interest but acts as a store of value in times like this. Okay, so speaking of gold and silver, gold in particular is actually the most crowded trade, according to Bank of America's monthly global fund manager survey. Um, this is basically just a survey showing what the top funds, including pension funds, hedge funds, those kind of sorts, are thinking about certain trades. So it actually scored about 65% crowded score as far as crowded trades go. So if we do see a massive exit, this could trigger a fire sale. But I don't anticipate that to happen soon, probably closer to 2028. So yeah, while the commitment traders, like I was showing you earlier, report uh, what I've been tracking and what traders are doing, their actual positions, this Bank of America survey actually tells you what they're thinking and fearing. So it gathers data from roughly 200 to 250 institutional fund managers who collectively oversee between 500 billion, 700 billion in assets. Uh, so because these participants manage massive pension funds, mutual funds, and hedge funds, the collective shift in opinion often dictates where big money flows next.
Okay.
Yeah, so the average cash balance, this is a most famous metric from the Bank of America report. And there's what's called the cash rule. So historically, if average cash levels rise above 4.5%, it's contrarian buy signal for stocks, meaning fear is high. And if cash falls below 3.5, historically, it's a sell signal, greed is high. So the latest one in January Fund Fan Manager survey, it's actually the most bullish since July 2021. So, they're expecting global growth to have jumped. Cash levels have fallen to a record low of 3.2%. And this is against equity, protection against an equity sell off, equity meaning stocks. Since this number is the lowest it's been since January 2018.
Mm.
This is generally bullish for stock market as well. So, assets across the board are likely to go up. Quantitative easing, of course, is a big part of why stocks will likely go higher. The Fed actually does continue with rate cuts.
Okay. What does BOFA mean? Because that to me now means breath of fresh air, but I bet they're not saying that.
So it's Bank of America.
Bank of
Yeah.
America, thank you.
Bank of America Fund Manager Survey,
Okay, great.
FMS. Yep.
They
Which I
still
showed, I believe, one of our first episodes. Okay, now let's talk about employment. Unfortunately, because of Trump's Bureau of Labor Statistics, they've been stalling the numbers. And I think because the numbers are so bad as of late.
mm,
Um, December 2025 is the latest jobs report we have. It's a little bit behind, but they finally caught up after months of not having this data. And this is basically showing that the labor market is frozen right now. And this is actually the most confusing labor market report I've seen in recent memory.
Frozen meaning it's not going up and down.
Yeah, well, hiring is frozen.
It
Yep.
That's the frozen part. Got it.
Um, there's a bit of a nuance though. There is year to date from 2024 to 2025 a 70% collapse in hiring. So the headline number for December shows, we only added 50,000 jobs. Anytime it's below 100,000 jobs added, that's generally, almost recessionary levels. Um, and we actually missed the expectations of 70K jobs added versus 50. While that sounds like growth, 50,000 jobs added, the context is actually much darker. 2024, the average was 167 jobs added per month versus the 50K that we have in December. The 2025 average for the whole year was 49,000 jobs added per month versus the 167 jobs added in 2024. So that's where the 70% decline in hiring comes from. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
just boots on the ground. My son and his friends are all talking about how incredibly difficult it is to get a job. Now that's also partly due to immigration, right? Because they don't hire white guys, especially young white guys anymore.
that's, unfortunately, that's been the trend. Yeah, as I can remember, unfortunately, because, there still are some DEI efforts. It depends where you are, what company you're working with. But yeah, in general, the more woke the company, yeah, they're not going to hire white guys. I bet that's more of a trend in Canada just because of the large Asian and Indian population you guys have compared to US.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I don't consider Indians Asians. They can try to claim that as much as they want, but it's just not true at all. Their cultures are vastly different,
Yeah,
especially East Asia.
they really are.
Those guys are smart. Indians, they definitely exaggerate their IQs.
Right. Sam has a good comment here. When cash is down, greed is high. It's bullish for stocks.
Yes, that's what this is representing.
And in case you didn't see it, Elisa said this is such a phenomenal presentation. Thank you. Been listening. Oh, she's cooking.
Yeah. So, job creation has collapsed 70% year over year. At current levels, the US is not creating enough jobs to keep up with the population growth, actually. We have a tale of two surveys, and this is kind of why the labor market's confusing right now because the report is a statistical mess. The two main ways we measure jobs are saying completely different things. There is what's called the household survey, and this is showing 2,000 jobs added. And this counts self employed and gig workers like Uber drivers, for example. But it is notoriously noisy and volatile historically. Most analysts trust the business survey, which is showing the 50K jobs added in the non farm payrolls. And that shows the market is effectively frozen when it comes to hiring jobs added. There are major three red flags here for U.S. economy in particular. There is a revision disaster going on. We found, they've been recalculating the numbers in the past few months and saying, oh, it's actually lower than we thought it was. And they just keep doing that over and over. We saw that last year. We found that, October's wasn't just slow, it was a disaster. Okay. It was revised down to negative 173,000 jobs added. So that's one of the worst crisis readings in history when it comes to this metric.
Wow.
Basically almost all job growth came from just three sectors: food service, healthcare, and social assistance.
Does it stimulate self-employment? Does it make people throw up their hands and go like, fuck jobs, work for yourself?
Yeah, that kind of leads into the solution to all this. It's kind of like what we saw during the GFC in '08. We saw newer companies taking more market share, I should say, from some of the bigger players that were more established. So entrepreneurism will probably be on a rise, given these job levels. I don't know if you guys have heard this anecdotally, but I've heard, you know, from young people fresh out of college to experienced high level executives. They've been sending hundreds, thousands of job applications, and they don't hear anything back. So as long as this continues, which we're seeing in the data that it is, people are going to have to get creative.
Exactly. And in the end, that's really good, right? Because compared to a job that you don't really have to be strong and resilient and resourceful and live on your wits and all that kind of thing. So I think ultimately that will strengthen our society to have more people needing to get creative.
Yeah. When it comes to most people, they really have to be pushed to a corner to start that business or take that risk, which right now, as you can see, is really not as risky as it may seem. Those kind of decisions. So yeah, even though hiring is slow, wages are kind of rising. Um, so this kind of creates a policy dilemma for the Federal Reserve. They're going to go off, these fudge numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they don't want to cut rates to help the slowing job growth market, but wages might keep inflation from falling at the same time. My view, though, is um, the worse this gets, like it has been, this is definitely a perfect excuse for the Fed to cut interest rates, and that's why they have been so recently. It's not because inflation; they forgot about all that. They have two um, decisions on interest rates. First is the labor market. Is it starting to decrease? And then also inflation. But, the latter, they just have not been prioritizing at all. It has been going a little bit higher and jobs have been getting worse. So, the macro outlook is, the Fed, uh, despite this weird data, traders, they still expect two rate cuts at the very least in 2026. Uh, if we do look at how smart money is pricing this in, they're really pricing in about 4 to 5 interest rate cuts in the later half of this year. Um, when it comes to unemployment, unemployment is actually lower than it might sound. Based on all this, is at 4.4%. It did actually fall slightly from uh, 4.5%, which it prevents people from panicking about immediate recession. But the underlying hiring trend, jobs added, is the weakest in years. So the labor market isn't falling off a cliff yet, but that's why I'm calling it frozen. In macro terms, frozen markets eventually crack over time.
Right. Can I ask you a question? Maybe it's a little premature for your presentation here, but with the job market having so much to do with AI and taking over for that, and corporations greedily following some like short-term bottom line, I would have to assess from my perspective. Now, when you have consumers who are struggling and they can't spend money with the corporations, doesn't that work directly against them, or are they just really short-sighted, or am I off on my thinking?
I'm sorry, what was the question? My ADHD is kicking in.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. So then, that like there's more AI, there's less jobs, they're getting more productivity out of technology than they are out
Yeah.
of people. And then, but the people are not going to be, because they're not employed, they don't have the money to spend
Yeah.
in the economy. So is that just short-sighted on their part, or like
Oh,
greed?
extremely.
Okay.
Extremely short-sighted, and,
Ah,
the Trump admin really represents, the new money over the old money. The new money meaning, Palantir, Peter Thiel, those kinda, uh, entities, let's call it.
mm,
JD Vance is basically Peter Thiel's, puppet, right? Especially the links to the AI industry in Ohio, which JD Vance is from. The guy's a total plant, fake wife, fake family. It's ridiculous. Um, so yeah, this is definitely short-sighted. They're just really prioritizing their top donors in the latest Trump admin. And we're seeing that happen in real time. And unfortunately, this is going to make employment worse. The more they prioritize AI, the less they prioritize the average person, unfortunately. So yeah, this is not going to be good for the economy in the long run. Like I said, this frozen market eventually will crack. We just see a bit of a decline in consumer spending last year. It has gotten a little bit higher, so we'll probably see a little bit of consumer spending first half this year, but second half I'm not so bullish on. So yeah, so this chart is actually showing like a oops moment, uh, statistical flukes. We're seeing a massive surge in labor productivity, like you said. Uh, the fastest in 2 years, thanks to AI. But that production is being driven by capital expenditure in artificial intelligence. Basically, companies investing in AI data centers, chips, etc., rather than human headcount. Okay.
Mm.
So from a quantitative perspective, the math is straightforward, but it's definitely troubling to me. Even though output is rising, it does help GDP. Because AI and automation are amplifying efficiency. Real wages are lagging, and like I said, the prices are going to continue to go up this year, next year, based on what we're seeing the supply managers. So there's going to be a surplus created by this new technology. It's going to expand corporate margins rather than payroll. So yeah, this, you know, if the jobs data, like I've been showing you, continues on this trend, then yeah, consumers aren't going to have really much money to spend. And really, if the corporates still make up for it, then we're in big trouble. As of right now, they are making up for it in the very short term, but it's not going to stay like that forever.
Right, when you look at, government jobs, which I think yeah, I don't know numerically, but it's a big thing in Canada, right? That's how they get power is they just turn everyone into, employee of their corporation, which is not a corporation, actually, I shouldn't say that anymore. And, so, then do you think this is a question, do you think that governments are as hip on using AI to replace all of their employees? So, also working against them? Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. You're
yeah,
actually seeing that in this chart right now.
fascinating. Yeah.
Now, of course, these numbers are fudged to really benefit Trump in the headlines, his truth social post. You're saying, hey, there's fewer government jobs, more private sector jobs. But if you look at the private sector jobs, they're really just to build the AI infrastructure. After that, they're unnecessary. You only need like tens of people to manage these facilities, the data centers especially. So, yeah, I do think the government will continue to decrease jobs. I believe the U.S. Department of Defense has officially started using Grok AI.
Hmm,
It's given access to some of their employees. So, Grok is just absolutely trash in my opinion, and I don't see how that's a good thing.
right, right, interesting. A question from the chat here. Is the NFP bad numbers driven mainly by AI layoffs? Maybe we just said that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Across the industries besides healthcare, food, um, and one more I can't remember. They have, the employers have actually been saying, yeah, we're seeing more productivity because we're using AI agents to replace humans with. The agents are getting better the more infrastructure is being built. So I don't expect that to slow down either because an agent is probably going to be faster than human inputting things into Excel.
Hmm, clearly. Yeah, I'm of two minds about all that. Marco said, I'm going to just pound the Rothschilds' retirement funds, 1099s for pre tax crypto and stocks is a total nightmare to deal with. Any comment there?
Sorry, I'm a little confused. I'm going to pound the Rothschild retirement funds. I'm
That's
not sure what
okay.
that means.
Okay, well, you have to clarify for us, Marco.
Yeah. But yeah, amidst all this, crypto has stayed subdued in its price levels.
Yeah, interesting. Hey,
Yeah. We've moved from digital to hard assets, which is interesting.
some things are up, like privacy coins are up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I really don't track that.
Mhm,
Bitcoin is kind of like an index for crypto. So that's really the main one I look at.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's definitely the bad thing or bad things I should say I've seen in the economy for the U.S. AI agents are improving, and I think this helps explain how we have improving productivity in services while employment is declining for the first half, especially in manufacturing. That's probably been the most hit. Um, so this tweet from Trump is it's just a massive cope and is hiding the fact that AI is wiping out jobs through improved agent models. Federal government jobs only count for so much. It's not that much. The narrative being floated by dumb money is that the drama in Venezuela is being used to boost the U.S. economy. Um, even though, even if that is true, it isn't going to work, right? As we highlighted earlier, the U.S. does need more energy than they had the capacity for to fuel the amount of data centers wattage usage. So it's not so easy as saying the Venezuela oil can sustain this like we showed earlier. Nuclear too. That's being hyped up right now by dumb money. but that isn't going to be online really until 2030. We're pulling the cart before the horse. Between the AI is our God crowd, and the Trump is going to save the economy crowd. Those are often juxtaposed, if not the same people.
Ah, there you go. And Marco clarified that mm, Roth retirement funds is post-tax retirement funds.
Okay, so I thought you were talking about the Rothschilds. You probably said that in a jokingly manner, but what he's referring to is the Roth IRA, which is a U.S. retirement account. And like you said, it is tax free. Unlike 401ks, you do pay tax on that later. So the only reason you would prioritize a Roth over a 401k is if you think taxes are going to go higher over time, which I tend to agree with. I think the Roth is a smarter move for most people, but for most people, they should be maxing out both
Okay.
if you're employed. So yeah, this chart illustrates the secured overnight financing rate forward curve. It just shows the markets expecting future interest rate cuts in the United States to go down to close to 3% by early 2028. While the news is making you believe Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, is going to prison, as of this year, the situation involving Powell in the Department of Justice has reached a boiling point. Historically, there's going to be a lot of legal mess here, political safeguards. Congress really controls the Fed, not DOJ. So it suggests that indictment is unlikely for the Fed, um, and that Powell will likely finish his term as chair. Okay, so this is why the rate cuts are priced in after he leaves. Actually, he's finished with his term in May. Okay, um, so Powell has revealed that under the Attorney General and Bondi, he was served Federal Reserve, or he was served a grand jury subpoena. So it's not an official arrest, right? It's really just a probe. The focus in the investigation is whether Powell misled Congress last year regarding the 2.5 billion renovation of the Fed's historical buildings.
And it's Powell that's done in May?
Correct. So as soon as he leaves, this number might go even lower because he's been holding back in interest rates more than the other Fed governors would like.
Yeah, you've been bullish Powell, if I said that
I
right.
have.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind the guy. He's
Mhm.
trying to sound the alarms like, hey, the more we cut rates, that's not going to be good in the short to long term, right? So um, it's definitely troubling to see, especially with inflation going higher. That's really the whole point of QT is to lower inflation, but we haven't seen that happen
Right.
really the last year.
And
Um,
a quick question about, USDC versus stablecoins.
I, I sorry, I just think stable coins are shit. Um, it's just the USD, right? There is no stable coin without the USD, so it's pointless. You're just transferring money to a third party when you could just hold dollars yourself.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And it also holds a little bit of commodities like gold, for example. So you get a higher return on investment just, doing these things yourself instead of outsourcing it to something that is really easily hackable, is hasn't been proven over time. But yeah, that's just my opinion on stablecoin and crypto in general.
Could you see that ever changing? Like, your opinion on precious metals has shifted?
Uh maybe. Maybe if the US does adopt a digital currency, which I doubt it will anytime soon in our lifetime, but we'll have to see. I'm willing to change my position if new data comes in. But so far as the data has been showing, this is really just Trump pumping his Trump coin. You know, his son is on the advisory boards of these crypto firms.
Mm,
So this is all fake news, really.
got it.
Yeah. So if you look at the past 2 decades, like you can see on this chart, inflation on paper is actually averaging around 2.7%, and that's roughly where we are today, supposedly. But if we look at the Purchasing Manager Index for both manufacturing and services, we can see prices are going to keep going higher. So this is a major difference between what we're seeing in the CPI numbers in reality. Now, speaking of metals, I do want to give some opportunity on how you can take advantage of everything that we covered today. Some of you might have missed out on the gold and silver rally, but based on my report, you might be a little bit bullish on it still. As shown in this chart here, gold and precious metals remain a relatively small allocation within global portfolios. It's only estimated 1 to 2% of assets globally currently allocated to gold stocks. So the light blue line is the precious metal index, and overlaid is the U.S. precious metal allocations worldwide. Um, so there has a lot of room to catch up here. And then this next slide shows despite triple digit gains that precious metals saw in 2025, I believe gold stocks could actually continue to outperform gold in 2026. Gold companies remain at historically low valuations based on most metrics. And while stocks experienced a re-rating in the second half of 2025, this came after almost 2 decades of persistent de-rating. Gold stocks could actually be your next opportunity potentially as this year moves on. And like I was showing, the interest rate expectations, it could even go into 2028.
So it's not late for the stocks, it would be a little late for the actual metals, right?
Yeah, especially physical. You're really going to get screwed over on the dealer spread. They're going to charge you at least 10% over spot. Spot meaning just what the market's actually pricing in. But the market's pricing in about 4,800 an ounce. If you try to buy from a dealer, it's going to be closer to 5,000 or if not more. So that's one thing you could do on your own. I'll let you do your own due diligence and find the gold and silver miners by yourself. I'm not gonna that's more for my trading group. But it is a macro outlook I have. And then
Mhm.
speaking of my trading group,
I was gonna say, why don't you say something about it just 'cause I do have a hard stop in, 14 minutes, so
yeah, this is the last slide actually.
okay. Okay, great.
Despite gold or silver for that matter having a 150% gain in 2025, this is the return I got just trading index options. And I wasn't betting on a direction. Like I wasn't betting the horse or the farm, I should say, that all stocks are going to go up or they're going to go down. I didn't take a direction. I actually traded both directions because I'm directionally agnostic.
Which
So
is your
while
whole
doing
entire
so,
paradigm of trading, right? So no matter
exactly,
what the market does, you have a hedge.
exactly, it's inevitable. The markets are going to move up or down, right, over time. So I'm not actually buying the stock itself. I'm trading contracts that are priced in the movements, both up and down. And with these option contracts, it limits my risk. As you can see here, this is asymmetric, where my losses were, for the $2,000 account, I was showing an example. Anyone can do this with very small amount of money. With this, you took about almost $2,000 in losses if we round up, but the wins were almost $8,000. So, with options and how smart money trades, like I demonstrate in the group, you're limiting your losses and you're letting your upside almost be virtually unlimited. Now, assuming stocks can technically go to infinity, not saying it will, but if you do the math right on the risk reward, you can get this kind of result. So, silver is up 150% last year, but the return on capital trading like this in the group, you got almost 300% for more than double silver's rise in just 1 year.
Right. That's
Now,
awesome.
this strategy in particular, I'm highlighting because this doesn't involve stock picking or doing research. Doesn't even involve like a long course. Actually, this is what I call a 5 minute uh, trading portfolio. So it literally is what it sounds like. It only takes 5 minutes to put this on, and you just copy basically what I do. You don't even have to take whole course. I just have one video on how to implement this, and we trade together as a group. So a lot of my traders are just copying what I'm doing. They don't have to stay glued to the screen. They're not day trading. They can place these orders overnight because I'm assuming most of you are working full time or you have a full time business. So yeah, with 5 minutes once every few months, you can implement this.
Nice. And I'm sharing a link to the Trader Business Builders here if you'd like to check it out.
Yeah,
This is a link that I've been gifted, so I will benefit if anyone signs up through me. So thank you very much for doing that. You don't have to. And thank you to Brandon for
of
giving me this.
course. Yeah, Beth, she shows up every week on our weekly calls, our live calls. Uh,
I love
so it's
them.
been a lot of fun. And I actually included a QR code that includes your link, Beth.
Okay. Oh, thank
So
you
if,
very
if
much.
you want to
That's
support
very kind.
Beth, and also join this group at the same time, this QR code will allow you to do so.
Very kind. Thank you.
So yeah, I know I'm going to be wrong at least 50% of the time. As you can see here, I have a win score of 5 and loss score of 4, which is generally that, right? But even that, as long as you make the math asymmetric, which is pretty easy to do, and I'll demonstrate for you guys continually, you can get this kind of results. So you can start with a few thousand all the way to higher.
Very good. Yeah, it's lovely because there's no big aggrandizement and oh, I make the best trades always ever. And I mean, you're one of the smartest guys I know, Brandon. And then so you're just demonstrating in a humble way what actually works, rather than trying to make these claims that everything is going to be so great and you're so great. And
Yeah,
yeah,
kind of like my other work. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel on any of this stuff,
right.
especially financial stuff. Um, so really, I just took a trading strategy that Morgan Stanley created in the 1980s. Goldman Sachs actually perfected in the early 2000s, and it's basically just long short, meaning you're directionally agnostic. You know that you're not going to be 100% right, but we can still make the math asymmetric. So really, I'm just taking this on a smaller scale for you guys because those guys are managing billions, right? They have multiple positions, not just the index like I'm showing you here. But this is, similar system, exact same kind of math that anyone can implement. No experience is needed.
Wonderful. That's really great. So I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us today? That was a great presentation, by the way.
No, I think we covered really the whole gambit here.
Okay, very efficient. Thanks for bringing a presentation. Gets me off the hook for trying to, full disclosure, I really didn't know one thing. I came into your class the first year. I'm literally just trying to hear and feel and be in the culture of that because my all my life I've blocked it or looked away or just not looked in. And so it's a good subject. It's the same way I've taken on the toxic bile paradigm and all the medical literature that it refers to. At first, it's just like I can't even hear it. It's just this wall of words, and I have to. But now I'm listening, and it's like, yeah, you say to me something like alcohol dehydrogenase, and my brain right away is doing the math on the D means, oh, less hydrogen, and there's the alcohol is poison, and so it comes in. I like learning in that environment with you in particular. And you
Yeah,
have good people
it's
around.
it's one of the reasons I stay looking so young. I don't know if you guys can believe this, but I'm actually age 30 this year.
There you go.
I've kept my youth because I don't work for money. I let my money work for me.
Well done. Yeah, you're a good example. And Sam is saying thank you for this presentation. You are very welcome. All right, so then I think that's all. Again, if anybody would like to check out the link is also in the notes below. So if you're seeing this after the fact and you don't catch the QR code or the chat, then you can find that Trader Business Builders link, long link in the notes down below. And I do recommend it. It's pretty risk free for a big education. You get access to your whole school account there that's got the 2 years of recordings and the classes to at least 2 rounds of the actual 8-week class that you do, walking people step by
Yeah,
step.
which I really stopped implementing just because I saw people don't really want to take courses, and it makes sense. I've experienced courses as well, and they suck. Time intensive. It can't get monotonous. So that's why I'm really focusing on the 5-minute portfolio because this can get you results within a few months if you implement it correctly.
And you're very attentive also to the markets on a daily basis. So you're always putting information into the forum and helping people to engage with it, asking questions and making polls and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really good. Be the best. Oh, be the is best. Sorry, I do not understand. Beth is best. Something like that. Thank you if that's what it meant. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much for joining today and giving attention to this. I always have a good feeling about that. Like I said at the beginning, reality's better than the made up stuff. And This week, I'm hosting Matt Arrett. I was actually going to maybe mention it to you, Brenton, as well. I'm doing a series on the Breath of Fresh Air on the evolution of culture and society. So it's a mega topic. It's like,
Yeah.
really, it could go in a lot of different directions. And no doubt at some point sooner or later, we could do one on economics and finance because that's a massive part of how our culture rolls. This week, it's going to be Matt Arrett, who is actually related to what we're talking about today, who's an expert in geopolitical evolution of culture and society. So he's a really smart guy, a good guy, and he genuinely wants to change the landscape of the culture for the better. And that's what I'm after with this series. The first of the series that is called Evolve, my son came for an interview and I asked him about his perspective. And we got one nasty Karen in the chat there that just couldn't resist. I'm sure they've been following me for the whole time already, just waiting for a chance to do some shit talking. And they did. And in a way, it's kind of fun because yeah, Liam's a good, I don't know, example of being able to think and come from a place that is well beyond where I was at 19. Like just absolutely, on the moral side, on the intelligence, on the basic awareness of what's going on in his world, he's really ahead. So that's worth watching. And then the week after, Dagmar Stansova is coming to talk about the evolution of the performing arts in particular, because that's her niche. So yeah, this series will probably go on for quite a while. And you can join us always. It's gonna be Friday at 2 PM Central Time.
If we have time for another show on that new podcast of yours, maybe we can talk
Yes.
about the anti-aging protocols that I've done. I don't know if you guys can
Inside
tell,
Agent.
but I am half Korean. I've been doing a deep dive on the culture behind that as of late.
Did you say Insight Agents, or did I miss that entirely?
Oh, you missed that entirely.
Okay, what
Yeah,
did you say then?
I was just talking about that anti-aging.
Anti-aging, not
Yeah,
Insight Agents. Right, right. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Let's do that. That would be a wonderful topic for that.
great.
Yeah, fantastic. And that it looks like that's gonna show up in your school as well. A little bit. You've got
Yep.
a course coming out?
So it's gonna be more of a guide than a course.
Okay,
I'm just gonna be sharing what I'm doing. Nothing financial in that group. It's gonna be a separate thing. It's more for fun, actually. It's not gonna be. It's more of a passion project of mine.
wonderful. That's really good. All right, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks again for joining and helping to share this out, if at all possible. That would be good. Lots of love for now, Branton and everybody here.
See you guys later.
Okay.